العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين صدق الله العظيم.
The year I don't see his grave, that's the year that I become blind. The Arba'een that I'm not there, rest assured is the day I've died. Be it that I'm full of youth or that I'm frail and old, his shrine gives me warmth and without it I'm frail and cold. His shrine gives me warmth and without it I'm frail and cold. God forgive me if on judgment day I am asked when I'm called, you missed Arba'een once. Of its greatness weren't you told? When I'm called for questioning, with dust in my hair I'll come, holding the flag that I held when I walked to Ali's son. Whatever I lost in life, on that walk so much more I'd find. The Arba'een that I'm not there, rest assured is the day I've died.
Assalamu alaikum.
Death is scary.
You know, it's funny, I think there's days when death is scary and there's days when death is like the easiest thing you feel you can encounter. I think it depends on your faith and how, whether or not you feel like you're weighed down with sins or whether or not, you feel like you're close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Those days where you just feel like you're doing well spiritually. I think those days death can come at you, you're like, I'm fine. But then there's days when you're weighed down by sins, which I'm sure we all have, backbiting on others, for example, or things that Allah is merciful, but things that sometimes, especially with the rights of people, you fear that when you die, these things will be held over your head. And I think it is definitely. Especially when they say, as in right now we're here in the graveyard, and they say when you're lowered into the grave you can still see everything. You can feel everyone walking away, you can feel everyone, once your family bury you, they all walk away and leave you there, and you're inside that dhalam, that darkness by yourself. And you literally feel as if you're inside the grave. I think that's definitely scary. But we hope inshallah with our deeds it will be open for us.
Some days death isn't scary. I want to know, when is it? Do you actually think that I'm not ready to go?
I think, Mustafa, it's only days where either, for example, I feel like I'm too attached to the world, or, for example, I let myself down when it comes to sins. You know how in Dua Kamira we recite every Thursday, Dhalamtu Nafsi. That's how I feel like when I've committed a sin. I feel like I've oppressed myself, I've wronged myself. Whenever we find ourselves in situations where we've committed sins, those are the days I'm like, not today, because I'm not ready. Imagine your whole life, for example, you served Allah, served Ahlulbayt, and then you mess up a day or two or three, you do your sins, and then Allah takes your soul that day. It's like, because you messed up in those last 3 days and you didn't, repent and turn back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's when you're like, that's when it's very scary. So I think those are the times where it's like, it's scary to die, because you're at your weakest, absolute weakest. You and your deeds are all against you, basically.
The days that you're actually not so scared. How much of the wilaya of Ali ibn Abi Talib, how much does that, do you think, benefit you?
100%. It's all of it. It's once you have that haqq, that truth in front of you, as I'm sure you know, when you see truth in front of you, and I'm sure you feel it sometimes, for example, when you're standing for salah, you're in a majlis, or you're in ziyarah, especially now in Karbala, when you're in ziyarah, when you stand in front of the grave, you feel like this is truth. If everything else in the world was a lie, this right now is the only truth that there is. You're standing in front of the grave and you have your imam in front of you, and you know wilayah is truth. I think that's what the difference is between, you know, having wilayah with you when you think about the reality of death, is that you have what is true, and that's all you need really to pass into the next world, what is true. So you've acknowledged now what is true, whether or not you acknowledge it with your deeds and your actions, and with your a'mal, whether or not you learn from that wilayah to not oppress other people, to not take people's rights, for example, is a different story. But I think when you follow that path, Mustafa, I think then you really don't fear death. And again, this is just me saying it now theoretically. We don't know how it's going to be when the angel of death comes to us and takes our soul from us. It might be the hardest thing in the world. But theoretically, you know, looking at the theory of death, sometimes you think when you have this love of Ahlulbayt alayhim salam, the main thing is their shafa'ah is there for you. They're there to intercede for you. You know, your whole life you served Ahlulbayt, your whole life you went to Ziyarah Imam Hussein alayhis salam and the Ziyarah of Ahlulbayt, and you hope that everything, all the little that you gave, they will come back to you. The same way you gave everything to visit Imam Hussein's grave, he will come to you and visit you in your grave when your sins are weighing you down.
You mentioned at the beginning something that I want to touch upon: the rights of others. You know, I always say, God forbid if you miss a prayer, God forbid if you don't go to Hajj, or you miss paying charity. We always say, you know, Allah is the most merciful. 114 chapters in the Quran, 113 start with Bismillah, Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim, the all merciful, the all beneficent. That rahmah, the mercy of Allah, which again, as you mentioned, dua kumail, that mercy that our minds cannot comprehend. Allahumma inni as'aluka bi rahmatika allati wasi'at kulla shay. That's the rahmah of Allah. We say Allah will hopefully forgive us. There's one thing that I always think about, that the rights of others, the haqq of others. Personally, do you think you've taken any rights of others? How do you go around that if you have taken someone's right away?
Yeah, bro, I think all of us, we try our best to be good generally. Do you know what I mean? Sometimes we fall, and when we do things we shouldn't do, either we backbite or, you know, but just generally there's little things that alhamdulillah I feel like I hope that I'm good at, like money, for example. You know, I'm scared to owe someone a penny and not give him that penny, because that's something he can hold against me, whether it's a penny or £10 or £1,000,000. For example, even when it comes to, like, you know, going to the shop and underpaying someone by mistake, or, you know, taking something that you shouldn't. These are rights of people that they can really hold over you. So there's these material rights that I think are very important. Then there's also the rights of people's character over you, backbiting someone. You know, speaking about someone behind their back, even though, you know, you meant it in a joking way. Maybe, say for example, you're in a gathering, everyone's joking about different things, and maybe you just throw a sentence out there, and you don't think about it again. But that person's right is against you forever. So I think what scares me most, bro, are those little things that you forget about, and you don't think about too much, that will be held over your head. There's a story that I remember hearing a lecture ages ago, where there was someone, I think he was a believer, he passed away, and then someone else had a dream that this believer was suffering in his grave really badly. And when they investigated why, basically what happened was someone came to him and asked him about, I believe it was a guy, to get married to their daughter.
Yeah.
And he wanted his son to marry her, that girl. He didn't even say he's a bad person. He just said,
I'm not sure.
I'm not sure. Just by saying that, he took his right away from him fully, and just for that he's suffering, because he took someone's, you know. I think these things are what scares me. Those little sentences you drop sometimes, or those little things you might say in jest to someone. Even if, for example, let's say, you know, you go to the office one day and then, you know, you make a joke at someone in front of everyone else, and you forget about it, but that person, it upset him. You know, I think these little things, Mustafa, I think these things scare me. Because ultimately, like you said, Allah is merciful. You miss a prayer, God forbid, you know, you do a sin. His mercy is infinite, but He's also just. and he's put, you know, his justice on the, you know, his justice for others is fair. So if someone has a right against me, it's up to that person to forgive me. I think that's what scares me the most. And all the khidmah and service and love that we do, you know, that is what can really stand against us when we die. And I just hope that we're not in that position. Inshallah.
How much do you personally read about death? Do you avoid death and the topic of death?
It's funny you asked that, Mustafa, because I don't think about death a lot. You know, I think that's from a door of faith. It's from a door of, you know, it's okay, because when we die, I have faith that I will pass on to the next world and pass on to the Ahlulbayt and to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But there is maybe a tiny bit of fear in me that maybe you're just turning a blind eye to death because you don't want to think about it. You know how they say death, you know, it should be on your mind, and you should to a degree fear. Even the Ahlulbayt in their du'as, you know, they talk about fearing death. So I'm wondering sometimes if me saying, oh, I'm not worried about death, maybe that's from a bit of mutakabbir, maybe it's a bit of arrogance in me, or maybe I don't understand death fully. Maybe I should be afraid of death. Maybe I should focus on death more. You know, it's funny because death is all around us, especially in this last 2 years with coronavirus. You know, we've all lost loved ones, you know, beside us and buried them, and even when burying them, in my experience, it's like it's something. I'm just being very real with you. Something very, very, very normal to me almost, and I hope that's from a place of faith and not from a place of, again, turning a blind eye to something I should understand more and be weary of. But I hope that, you know, the worship that we do and the you know, intentions toward good that we have are there to help me through this process that will be difficult one day, inshallah.
Has the death of anyone close to you affected you? If so, how?
Yeah, so I only really faced death twice in my life. The first time was my granddad, my dad's father, who I was very, very close to. He died in the year 2000.
So I'm guessing you're quite young.
Yeah, I was only 10 years old, but he basically, you know, I used to go to the house every weekend and always sit with him, and I literally used to sleep in the same bed. It was very, very close to him. And it's funny because now my cousins, when they see me, they always say you look like him. So it's like there's a real connection that even sometimes even though so much time has passed, I'll wake up just having this yearning to see him again, like a bit of some tears in my eyes, and even having dreams about him. I remember I had a dream about him a few years ago, where he looked at me and he said, you guys that are still in this world, you think that I'm the same as I was when I died, but after I died, I've reached levels that you can't even understand. So these little things, you know, I think he was definitely my first connection with death. And it's funny because even though he's gone, he's been buried, his spirit lives on, his memory lives on. And then there was my grandmother, my mom's dad, my dad's mom, sorry, so his wife. She actually suffered from Alzheimer's for a good 10 years. And by the last few years, she was just, you know, she wasn't really there anymore. And she died the year COVID hit. And we actually buried her, me, my cousins, like we actually lowered her casket into the ground, me and my cousins. So I think that was definitely, you know, it was a very humbling process, and it's also just seeing, I think, my dad as well, because, you know, as much as we love our grandparents, we'll never love them as much as our parents do, because that's their parents, right? And just, you know, seeing my dad like kind of speaking to her after they put the dust up on her grave, and this is like, it's weird, Mustafa. I'm sure you know, like when you grow up with grandparents, like there's a certain scent that you know of them. There's a certain that you're flesh and bone. You know, you have a bit of, there's like an intimacy there, and that's essentially what you're burying beneath the ground. And I think that was very. It was a very interesting experience. That was probably the first time I think I ever buried someone, and then it was a reminder that, you know, death comes to us all, and then, again, like being the person who's burying, sometimes you tend to forget that the person in the casket, when you're that person and you're being lowered into the ground, and then your son is saying, you know, goodbye to you, and then they're putting turab on your grave, and then they're going away, and then you're still there in the grave and seeing everyone. I think that's what's scary, and we hope that our deeds and our Salatul Layl and Quran and Ziyarah is what helps us brighten our grave, and hopefully it'll be an easy process, inshallah.
Coming back to this rights of others, inshallah you haven't taken anyone's right, and inshallah even if there are people out there, then inshallah they can forgive you. I want to ask you this question: are you ready to forgive others for taking your right away?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. I think because
Why?
Because honestly, it's a lot of it is to do with self-forgiveness as well. It's about letting go of things sometimes. I think maybe I don't know this for sure, maybe one of the philosophies of why we're meant to forgive others. Obviously from an Islamic perspective, is so Allah can forgive us, right? Allah wants us to forgive so He can forgive us. The second thing is that, sometimes when we don't forgive, we keep these things deep inside us, and then we hold on to them. And it just makes us very, very angry, very agitated in our lives. It's interesting because I was reading this book recently which talks about how Allah wants us to become nafs al-mutma'inna before we die.
Yeah.
He wants us to become the contented soul before we pass away.
Yeah.
So in that process is us reaching Allah and also forgiving others. People are going to hurt us wherever we are in our lives. But I think there's a maturity in coming to a point where it's like, you know what, like you did something based on where you were in your life at that time. You did something maybe because of your own insecurities or your own flaws that I don't know about. If I was in your position, maybe I would do it worse. And ultimately, we also know that Allah is just. On Judgment Day, He's going to judge everyone fairly. So I don't think there's a need for me to be like, I'm not going to forgive you or hold this over your head. Because if I was truly, really oppressed, and I'm talking like real oppression, like the same way Nawasib oppressed Shia, that kind of oppression, Allah is going to take care of that. So there's no reason for me to hold on to anything. So I hope that I hope that people forgive me as much as I would like to forgive them. And I think that's really it's an important process to grow and to mature yourself. So you become nafs al-mutma'inna before you leave this world, inshallah.
One thing I've known you for a long time is when it comes to ziyarah, you're very passionate. We've been on ziyarah many times, from the times we've walked together on Arba'een to ziyarahs where we've had work alongside our ziyarahs. What brings about that passion for ziyarah? Is it to do sometimes with death as well in the back of your mind? Maybe not when we're here, but does that ziyarah in the back of your mind say, you know what, now I've visited you after your passing away, I hope you can be there for me?
100%. I think that's the core of it. It might not be the reason why we come overtly. When we come because of love. We come because of love, and because we want to pay our allegiance. All these various levels of service that we know we've grown up with, and we do all our lives. Just doing majalis and serving in majalis. You lecture, for example. When you do those things, you're drawn to Imam Hussein more and more. So you want to do everything you can to pay allegiance to him. That includes visiting him and doing ziyarah of him. Because ziyarah is not easy. Ziyarah is not easy. You know very well. Whenever we come to Iraq, there's always a bit of challenges, whether it be sickness or weather or visas or there's always something that's there to challenge you. And I think that's a reminder that you're going to be rewarded for what you've gone through to come for ziyarah. Even if sometimes for example the challenge is financial.
Yeah.
You've given your last few £100 on a ticket to come for ziyarah in hoping that money will get returned back to you. So I think these sacrifices that you give toward Imam Hussein alayhi salam, 100% they will come back for you. 100%, both in this life and in the hereafter. And I'm saying that from experience. I know the past 10, I'm sure you've seen as well, the past 10 years of coming for ziyarah, I've seen nothing but khair in my life. I've seen nothing but rizq and nothing but, obviously there are challenges, but nothing but growth in every aspect of my life. And I put that hands down to ziyarah. And if that's in my life, for me that's a hujjah, that's a proof that the hereafter will be the same. So 100%. Again, the only thing that I fear is that our sins will get in the way of all that, dare I say, good work that we've done. all that effort that you put in, and because of a few sins or a few rights of people that you've taken, they come and block all of that. That's my fear, and that's what we seek refuge from.
When do you think that fear will stop? Do you think there'll be a stage where you think that fear is no longer there? I've done.
No, the fear will always be there, because as long as we're alive, we're prone to mistakes, isn't it? Every single day that we're breathing, me and you, we're prone to mistakes. We're prone to saying something we shouldn't say, or doing something we shouldn't do, looking at something we shouldn't look at, speaking to someone we shouldn't speak to, anything, taking something we shouldn't take. You know, even if it's the smallest thing. Sometimes, you know, sometimes you walk past a chicken shop, you're hungry, and you go inside, and you might not, you know, focus on, you know, is that food really, really halal, and you eat it, and you're like, it's fine. But that's something you'll be accounted for.
Yeah,
when you die, that's something that will sit in your stomach when you die. Even if it might be, for example, the Quran. Let's say Quran testifies against you. You didn't read me enough. You didn't recite me enough. Salat al-Layl, you know, I was there for you to use every day. You never used me. And you know what's funny is that, you know, someone told me recently that there was a grand scholar who died. I forget his name, but his son saw him in a dream, and he asked him, what do you regret? And he goes, I used to read Ziyat Ashura every single day. My only regret is that I didn't read it twice a day.
Allah.
So these little things as well, you know, we talk a lot about the journey into death. I think one thing we also need to think about is the regrets that we will have for the things we didn't do enough, because we have all this at our disposal. Times we sat down, you know, being bored on our phones and watching TV, we could have read Tiyat Ashra, or you know, just literally just turn to what Imam Hussein said, Assalamu alaikum wa Abdullah, done anything good. You know, I think that's even what this sitting down with you is making me think about, is just, that's what we need to think about. How many good deeds can we accumulate, so when we die, we're going to be okay, inshallah.
It's cold, and I'm sorry I'm taking a bit of your time, but you know what, even me just presenting this show with different various guests has got me thinking, you know, just being in this place, the whole graveyard sort of environment, and hearing people maybe in the background. Earlier I think there was people burying their loved ones, and there was people crying. The whole environment gets you thinking more, you know, about, you know, and that's why maybe sometimes it's recommended to attend a funeral, because it becomes a reminder about death. Nouri, you know, you're my brother, you're my friend. I'll be honest with you, I hope that you live a long, happy life in the service of the Ahlulbayt. But I want to ask you, you know, and you said it already, you can never do enough. As I said, you know, may Allah give you a long life, but do you think that you're ready to face your Lord? Do you think you've done enough? That's my question. You think you've done enough?
I'm scared to say I have, because like I said, like, there's always so much you can do, and it's funny because sometimes when you're going through a really hard time, Mustafa, in your life, you think, you know, I'm okay, I'm done, I'm okay to go now. I've served Imam Hussein, I've worshipped, I'm okay. But we forget that we have so much a'mal and du'as that talk about longing life. And I think that's because the more good deeds you can accumulate, the higher status you'll be when you die. And it's that regret, right? It's that regret. I remember Sheikh Ali, who's, I think you're going to have it as a guest on as well. One time he mentioned a story that someone at, I think it was Atlanta, passed away,
yeah,
and came back to life like a few hours later. And then he spoke to various scholars about what he saw, and they advised him, don't say what you saw. Because I can tell you one thing, is that ever since then, he's always in Arba'in serving the Zuwar, Imam Hussein.
okay.
I think that's what's, you know, that hunger, that chase to run after good deeds, and run after helping people, and run after, you know, accumulating those. These are things that we'll regret when we die. So I don't think I've done enough. It's only really up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala whether or not my time is now, or 10 years, or 50 years, or 100 years. I hope that when I do die, you know, I can look back at my life and have that contentment, that contented soul that we need to become before I pass on into the next world, inshallah. So it's funny because we started this episode speaking about being ready for death, but I think the more you think about it and the more angles you approach it from, the more you reflect on whether or not you really are ready for death. And we just pray that Allah takes our souls at a time when we are ready.
When I met you, you started these majalis that you do and you continue to do till today. And it's the majlis that you've held on to close to your heart, and it's the majlis of Al-Baneen. We're gonna speak about Al-Baneen. Why? And you know, I can speak about any personality, and I specifically chose Al-Baneen because I've seen, and I know you, as I mentioned, quite well. And I'm 100% sure there are times where you didn't have the money to do that majlis. Why did you continue doing that majlis?
You know, honestly, Mustafa, it comes from a place of this is what has to be done. I think the classic answer is, oh, you know, we're here to, it's out of love, or it's out of, but for me, it's like fitrah. It's like it's deep inside me. It's like a magnet. Like you have to do it. Like if I was to turn around, like we have time recording this, the Fatima al-Baneen is coming in the next few weeks. If I was to turn around and be like, you know, I'm not going to do it this year, I'll feel bad. I'll feel horrible. Like for me, it's like I have to do. It's like an obligation for me. And I think the reason for that, Mustafa, is that when we think about the Ahlulbayt alayhi salam, obviously we're close to all of them. Imam Hussein, Fatima Zahra alayhi salam, you know, the Holy Prophet Muhammad alayhi salam, all of them we commemorate them and think about them. But al-Baneen, she wasn't from this holy bloodline. She wasn't from this divine house. She was dare I say, a normal person that became a servant of Ahlulbayt alayhi salam, and she gave everything to Imam Hussein. So the same way we strive to give what we can to Imam Hussein, be it with our time, with our money. You know, she gave obviously her 4 sons and Abu Fadl Abbas, who, as we know, is, you know, just one of the greatest legends of Islamic history. To have someone like that and just sacrifice him for the sake of Imam Hussein, something greater than him, something greater than herself, that's very attractive. That's a very attractive quality. And I think the reason perhaps why I feel like it's important to commemorate her and remember her is because, in a way, any of us can become al-Baneen. Not that we will, but in a way, we can always aspire to become al-Baneen, or aspire to reach that status. You know, we know now in Iraq, for example, how many graves are behind us of shuhada, of martyrs, whose mums have lost 1, 2, 3, 4 sons here in Iraq alone to bombings or on the front lines. You know, women like this exist. It's not an impossible thing to reach. So I think that's what's inspiring. I think that's what's aspirational. It's that connection to al-Baneen. And sometimes as well, Mustafa, sometimes, you know, as great as Imam Hussein is, as close as he is to our hearts, sometimes there's a bit of embarrassment between us and him. Even when I go to the shrine, sometimes I'm like, you know what, like I'm embarrassed sometimes to speak to you because I'm a sinner. There's a gap between me and you. So maybe I need to go to someone else who can overlook those things. You know, Imam Hussein is the grandson of the Prophet of Allah. The Rasal is in his hand. So if you go to him and you haven't prayed, or you've missed Fajr, he's like, okay, you can come to me, but, you know, this is my message and you're not listening to it. So sometimes, you're embarrassed sometimes, so you go to a different door. So I think for that, sometimes you go to Fadl Abbas or al-Baneen and ask her to also intercede for you, inshallah. So I think that's probably where it comes from.
Today, you visited us here in this graveyard, and as I mentioned, it's quite cold, and I've got something for you. Nouri, oh my dear brother, may Allah prolong your life, give you a lengthy life in the service of the Ahlulbayt alayhim salam. There's some water from the shrine of Al-Abbas alayhi salam. I've got a kafan that's handwritten, and I've got a gift for you, and it's this beautiful gift, the flag of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. I want to hand this over to you, and I want to ask you a question. What does the service of Imam al-Hussein, when it comes to writing poetry, mean to you?
I think it's you know how they say that Imam Hussein, Safinat al-Najat, he's the fastest, I don't know what that exact hadith is, but he's the fastest Safina to
the Ark of Salvation, and the fastest to salvation.
Yes, and there's a hadith like that. I think that's what it is. He's almost the fastest. This whole episode is speaking about accumulating good deeds. He's almost the fastest way to reach Allah,
that good
the
deeds.
fastest way to reach heaven, the best way to reach heaven. Because in that service of Imam Hussein, you learn the truest Islamic principles of selflessness, of love, of caring for others, of standing up to oppression. These are at the core of the heart of Rasulullah. So I think that's why Khidmat al-Hussein is so important to me, because, you know, from one angle you reach Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and from another angle you better yourself through that. So yeah, I think that's, and I think honestly, I think when I die, my only wish, I don't know, you know, we haven't spoken much about, you know, what kind of legacy you leave behind. Sometimes I wonder if we should ever even think about the legacy we leave behind, because we should be focusing on what Allah thinks of us.
How do you think you'll be remembered?
I hope, I pray, inshallah, all of us, both of us, will be remembered as servants of Imam Hussein, because that's the biggest pride.
I always say this:
the biggest identity.
The biggest identity and status anyone can get in this is being called that Khadim al-Hussein. I'm honored to have had this episode with you. You're a true Khadim al-Hussein. I know you've got a poem for us, and inshallah you can recite it for us.
Inshallah. What salvation does man have when he stands in the hereafter if he does not receive a glance from Fatima Zahra? When I'm lowered into my grave and all my loved ones disappear, the sins that once brought me pleasure, now they bring me only despair. I can feel the ground tighten while my lungs feel the lack of air. I see not, there's only darkness, only the void and gripping fear. How can I ever save myself from munkar and from nakir when I couldn't even restrain myself when shaitan whispered in my ear? Dead, in dead silence, only the moving of the earth I can hear. I hope in Allah's mercy, but I feel that His justice is near. How weighty were my sins that they may tip my scale of deeds. I cry out in fear in my grave, yet not a single soul heeds. No friends, no family, no children to rescue me in my time of need. Even the joy that was once air, I can no longer enjoy to breathe. Every day, hour and second lived are roads that to my grave lead. The only thing left worth counting are the prayers upon prayer beads. What hope is there for me, who with his actions hadn't believed? What hope is there for me, if my beloved doesn't intercede? Oh Allah, protect me from that first night I spend in the grave. How apt is it that the master is feared so much by his slave. Protect me from the day I watch all those I knew in life leave, and I am left shrouded and alone as a single human heartbeat I crave, and the darkness is suffocating with not an ounce of air saved, and the fear is so overwhelming that no man can pretend that he's brave. And you wonder on who you've upset, who forgot, and who forgave. For nothing can save you now, save your deeds and what little you gave. And when the width of the grave is tight, its narrowness causing me pain, and I can feel the crushing of the earth begging it to show me restraint. And I can see small creatures moving, seeking blood in my bloodless veins, and munkar and nakir appear, but I can't get my tongue to explain. What refuge do I have? What sort of salvation can I attain? How I yearn just one more day of life, so that good deeds I can obtain. What slope will ever be steeper? What hope is there that remains if in the grave I am not rescued by my beloved Hussein? And though my tongue refuses to move, from my soul I'll plead daily. The same way I visited your grave, in my grave please visit me. Here, crushed by the dust, how I miss the scent of Karbala's dust so terribly. For when this world crushed me in life, it was in your shrine that I found relief. And when you come, don't come alone. Bring Abbas and his chivalry. For never have I cried out, Ya Abu Father, and not been saved immediately. Together, soothe my soul and ease the infliction on my body. For indeed Allah is merciful, and indeed you are that mercy. And on the day of judgment, when mankind is in fear and shaken, and my scale does not tip to good deeds but instead to evil and sin, I'll call out to the king of Najaf, like a father is called by his orphan. For I know that between his two hands rest both hell and heaven. I'll bow my head in shame, for I am not among his best of men. But I hope that his love for me is as great as my love for him. For I prostrated to the Kaaba, knowing that he was born within, that Muhammad is Ali and Ali is him. No doubt and no question. It may be that we have good deeds, but our sins are abundant. And to the facade that is this world, we have no detachment. The flesh of brothers in our teeth makes our good deeds redundant. And for those who forsake their prayer is no salvation, only torment. There is no hope for us sinners on the day of judgment, which is why at the door of Fatima we bow down as servants. For if the Queen of Women notices us even for a moment, then perhaps on Judgment Day we can say we were triumphant. Then perhaps on Judgment Day we can say that we were triumphant. Allahumma salli ala.
شلون بي على ضغط جسمي القبر وقامي الخشم حلي بوم ويدور شلون بي منوقف بيوم الحشور ويا خلي المعبود باستجواب شلون بي منوقف بيوم الحساب شلون بي منوقف بيوم الحساب شايل ذنوبي وجيت دامي